Hello, everybody. This is Nick,
And this is Josh.
and we are the Hypertrophic Woobies. This is our podcast. And so, this is a series we're starting here regarding futurism and just some hypotheses that Josh and I have regarding what we're going to expect in the years to come.
Yeah, basically just theories about what might happen in the future about specific things. And today's topic is regarding overpopulation. A very popular topic.
A nice, not depressing topic to start this series on.
Oh yeah, super happy.
Yes.
So, and we've talked about this before, so a lot of this will be going over ideas we already have, but as I'm sure most of you have already kind of thought about in the back of your minds, this country and this world in general are kind of, very slowly, and I don't emphasize slowly, heading down the path of reaching the max population that this landmass can handle.
Yeah.
And so, as much as no one wants to admit it, at some point we are going to have to address that in some way.
Yeah. We're in America, by the way. You said this country. Some
Yeah.
people might not know.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. And so we'll discuss here in this episode, I guess, some ways to possibly have solutions to stuff like that. First thing I want to mention is I remember when I was 13, 14 years old, I first heard about the issue with overpopulation, how based on mathematical models, if this trend continues by year whatever,
Yeah.
there's a mathematical model showing that if the trend continued, that at one point the entire surface area of the Earth would be covered in humans, and then at one point the entire mass of the Earth would just be humans. Like the humans would be the same mass as the Earth.
And then on top of that, there's even just the understanding that a specific environment can only support so much life.
Right.
Of
course.
There's a plateau that beyond that, nothing else can exist.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, if we ever got to the point where the entire surface of the Earth is covered in humans, well then, that wouldn't happen because humans would die out and everything. But it's just it's scary to think that if the trend were to continue, it would continue in that direction.
So, and obviously, kind of, backtracking on that, so basically it all boils down to we're not going to naturally stop before it's too late. We're not just going to say, hey, we should stop having children. I honestly don't think, as a species, we will decide to do that until we reach a point where we are so affected that it's almost kind of too late to turn around. So kind of on that note, the governments that be will more than likely have to come up with a method themselves to keep it in check at some point before it gets to that point of no return.
Which is depressing to think about. Because, I mean, and again, I'm not going to pretend I know things, but as far as, I understand, in China, there's, the one-kid policy or whatever. And the thing is, that sucks, and that's depressing that is happening, but, if our population continues trending the way it is, that could be a thing where it has to be regulated, in any country because of just the sheer mass of people.
And that is kind of the first answer to this problem is, first and foremost, just simply regulating how many children a couple can have.
Yeah.
And, you could make it 1, you could make it 2, but in some way setting a very defined limit that you as a pair can only have this many children and that's it.
Yeah.
But, the question after that to ask is, what happens if that's not enough? What if, say, that doesn't fix the problem? What then would be the next step?
Soylent Green. Just start turning people into food. Yeah, probably not. Yeah, and that is a big deal. I'm sure we were going to get to this point. I'll just bring it up now. One of the propositions is leaving Earth.
Yeah.
Humanity, getting out there to other planets and establishing civilization on other worlds, that sort of thing.
So rather than controlling our population to meet the current land mass, expanding the land available to us so that we don't have to control our population.
Right, yeah.
And in a way that definitely has its own hazards and its own risks. Because we are definitely an adaptable species, but we still don't know how adaptable we are to other planets.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's going to be a huge leap forward in order for us to be living on other planets like that.
Yeah, kind of as they said, like obviously the closest option available to us is Mars, and there's already, of course, companies right now looking to do possible one-way trips and establish colonies there. But as it's kind of been described, living on Mars will be nearly 10 times as hard as trying to live in Antarctica.
Right, yeah. Until they, terraform the planet or whatever.
Yeah, the temperature changes are so much more drastic. There's no oxygen to breathe, no water to obtain. There's nothing.
Although there could be water obtained, because there is water on Mars, frozen water, and they had a way to actually harvest it. That could be a thing.
Yeah, but it's a very steep obstacle to tackle, and I guess the real question is, so what would be the better choice? Spending time and resources towards exploration of other planets to settle, or spending time and resources and effort towards the best answer for keeping our population in check here?
It's probably the latter, because it would be pretty impractical to do that sort of thing, to go outside of Earth.
Yeah.
And something that's also worth addressing here is it's possible that both happen.
Very possible.
There could even be a thing where there's a certain sanction of people who are very much space minded or whatever. The whole goal of this one civilization that kind of breaks off from Earth is to civilize other parts of the solar system or whatever. But then there's also people on Earth who are trying to stay on Earth, and they want all their generations to come to be on Earth as well. So it could be a joint kind of thing too. That definitely could be what happens.
That's definitely possible. And in the way I kind of look at it in a way of kind of a race, the way I kind of see it. So, in terms of settling other planets and making it there and setting it up so that we can colonize other planets, that is definitely a realistic possibility, but it's going to take a very specific amount of time to do, and there's not really much of a way that we can speed that up in any effective way other than just keeping at it. So, settling a planet has a very specific time limit versus us reaching too high of a population that it becomes an actual effect. That's a time limit that we actually have a very drastic control on. So it kind of becomes how much, or rather, how soon do we reach being able to colonize a planet versus reaching the mass threshold for this planet.
Right.
Obviously, like you're saying, it's very likely both will happen, that we figure out how to control our population here and settle another planet, but it's kind of a balancing act. How much do you put towards one versus the other so you don't lose the race, if that kind of makes sense.
Right, yeah, exactly. And I think so much of that is unpredictable, just from an economical point of view. We don't know how quickly one thing is going to happen versus another. The more people we have, the more innovative minds we're going to have, and workforce to create the vehicles that get us to space and be able to colonize. So it's really hard to even know what would happen first.
But
And I'm sure there's some really good books out there on that subject too.
but now that I kind of think about it further, in a way, like, and I get you may or may not agree, but there probably is no long-term permanent solution to population control on Earth. We can keep it in check, but just like trying to keep the population in check of animals, it's going to be a touch and go thing. And really, the permanent long-term solution is finding more land, which means finding planets.
Yeah.
So maybe it is a thing where we kind of do have to assume that we need to figure out how to do it.
But we need to be able to regulate our population until we get to that point.
Exactly.
Because if we overpopulate too quickly, we're not going to have a chance to go out to outer space and do all that. Yeah.
So which do you concentrate on first?
I think you have to concentrate on what's at home first. There is another solution to the overpopulation problem.
Yeah, the last one that we haven't mentioned.
Well, there's actually a couple. The last one I'm going to mention is going to be really weird. But what's the one you have in mind? It's probably the same one I have in mind.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and say it?
Well, you go and say it because I think mine's going to take some explanation. The last one I have.
Well, it's kind of the flip side of the coin. Preventing people from being born was the first thing that we notified. The second question is removal of already living people. And take that as you will. I say it in that way because there's a number of ways to achieve that answer. There's just simply killing people until you're at the right number. There's just allowing it to go towards the method of survival of the fittest, letting the people whose bodies are stronger or minds are stronger, what have you, survive versus those who don't. Or being kind of on that same tangent, selective about people with certain genes get to go forward while others don't.
And these are all shitty solutions, mind
Oh, it's
you.
all very crappy.
Yeah.
I would not. Those are like the very last resort things, but it's something that kind of needs to be said out loud, I guess would be the way I'd say it.
Yeah, and they're all shitty solutions. And the thing I was gonna say, and this isn't really so much a proposition, it's a way that this can naturally solve itself, is the more and more population you have, just from a sociological perspective, the more likely the masses are going to start killing each other. And, we always, talk about the possibility of like World War III or, civil wars, et cetera, like massive civil wars. It's possible that naturally, because of the increasing population, it causes more and more crime and more wars to happen, which thereby decreases the population. Which is, also a sad, shitty solution, but that is a natural way that could be resolved.
Now, two other things I want to bring up, both a short-term help to population control, as well as a long-term downside to population control, specifically to humans, is basically on the terms of genetic manipulation. The positive one I'll bring up first is, it's more of a short-term, negligible difference, but obviously, so part of the big problem of population limits of an area is how much resources get used up per creature.
Right.
So, phrasing it that way, one might say, well, what if you set it so that specific creature, that specific species, uses less resources per living individual? And so one thing that could end up happening just as a additional thing to help things along is kind of maybe if we get genetic manipulation far enough along, setting it so that we as a species don't require eating as much, don't require as many things to go about our daily lives.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Now,
I can see that.
The flip side of that, and additionally on the side of genetic manipulation and manipulation of ourselves, which I feel will happen at some point and will be a big adding to the problem of this, is increasing our lifespan as a species.
Right, yeah, that's also can contribute to the population staying high.
The longer we live, the harder it will be to control our own population.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
And as much as I hate to say it, I think That's not an if, that's a when. We will at some point increase our natural lifespan. We've been doing it slowly over the last centuries and all that, but I get the feeling that at some point, maybe in the next 100 years, maybe longer, maybe shorter, we'll make a drastic leap in how long we can live.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a lot of people are going to cheer at that, but it's going to be a big effect on all this.
Yeah. Kind of like I think it was on Futurama. There's like a upper limit. It's like the professor like was gonna have to be killed by the government because he was too old or whatever. So like there was an age limit or something.
Like it's crazy, but I mean that's a thing. The longer you have to support someone, the more resources they use up.
Yeah. Something. So Kurt Vonnegut is one of my favorite authors, and he wrote this short story called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and it's. I can't remember exactly what happens in the story, but pretty much the setting is everyone lives in these like apartment complexes, and the apartment that the story takes place in, there's like 5 generations of that family living in there, and it's a real problem because it's sad. I mean, you don't want people to die, but like at the same time, like there were people living in their household who were pretty much in a vegetative state as far as I remember, and yeah, I mean it's just a shitty situation. I mean I feel shitty even talking about it, but I mean like it's addressing the fact that these are issues that are going to happen if longevity is a thing. Quality of life is more important than quantity in a lot of ways, and so if you live to be 160 but like the past 60 years like you don't know who anyone is because you have dementia, I mean that's shitty.
That's a real thing.
And I'm not advocating anything by saying that, but I'm just saying generally you can see where some issues would pop up by
we're touching on possibilities.
I don't think we're trying to form opinions here, we're just stating facts.
So a lot of it, so at least to kind of to rephrase a lot of things we touched on. So a lot of the effects and things that kind of come along with this. So there's general regulated population control, controlling how many people are born. And on the flip side of that, there is control via letting people die off, whether that be forcibly or naturally, or selectively even. And then in addition to that, another adding to the problem is manipulation of our own genetics, increasing our lifespan, increasing our resistances, increasing how much resources we use. And then on top of that, the last piece of the puzzle, rather than manipulation of ourselves or our population, increase of the resources or landmass available to us.
Like with outer space travel and all that kind of stuff. I did want to expand on one thing really quick though. So you're talking about how if we could like manipulate the human body so it wouldn't require as many resources.
Yes.
I wanted to take that to the extreme. What if, because of our technology, we're able to convert human consciousness to like a computer system,
digital,
right? And so suddenly you could have countless human population, but it's all like in this huge network of servers that's in some facility like in one location or maybe multiple locations, but so suddenly it's as if the earth no longer even has humans on it, but they exist, but they're only like in like a digitized form, or there could still be humans that are physically on earth, but like there's just a lot less of them, and most of them are digital. And then there's questions about what is consciousness. You're gonna have these beings that are like half human, half AI, da 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 da. But like it is a solution.
Well, in a way, it's kind of the final extreme of the issue. Remove the resources from the problem, and you don't have the problem.
Right.
But and maybe there, in the future, the way that we perceive that in and of itself may change, but kind of as we perceive it now, there would still be a finite limit even on that, because even if we were digital, we have to exist within something, within a server or computer. And while that would allow a great many of us to exist, that would still have finite limits on how many of us there could be.
Right, but it would be
It'd be an enormous number, but
yeah,
there would still be a finite limit. And then that also begs the question, beyond that, how, what limit is that? If in that form we're capable of spawning new life, again, do you place a limit on that, and yada yada, and you still kind of arrive back at a similar problem at some point.
Yeah, at some point, but the good thing is...
It does make it a lot easier. It increases the limits.
Yeah. I mean, you do make a good point. Like, it's not a complete solution, but it's... If you're able to keep... Well, it's not a complete solution.
Okay, it seems that we had a technical issue, but we are back on track now.
Yeah.
So you may have just heard like a weird little disconnect there for a moment.
Yeah.
But kind of just picking back up where we left off, and we're actually not going to be going on too much longer, but so as we're talking about digital life forms, it's a weird, like, we'll probably go deeper into that on a whole other podcast, but just to touch on it briefly, it definitely, like, just looking at it purely in this context, it's one of the best solutions in terms of how many of us are allowed to exist.
Right, yeah.
And those simple layman's terms, in far as how many of us are allowed to exist, the best way is remove the problem of physical resources and make it all digital.
Right, yeah. And I have this idea of, like, by the time we would be able to do that, we'd have, like, these robots that could do maintenance on, like, the servers and stuff. So there'd actually have to be no humans out there actually doing maintenance and or any of that kind of stuff. And we could even have, like, these AI servers, like, or not AI, these servers with human, consciousnesses on them, like, floating out in space and shit, too. It doesn't have to technically even be on Earth at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one of those... I think we pretty much touched on all the big pieces of the problem of overpopulation, as far as I can think of.
Yeah, and there are a few other things we could say, but we don't need to get into it here.
A lot of little things.
But I just want to acknowledge the threat of overpopulation is definitely a thing.
It is.
But people will argue how quickly it's going to happen. Because I guess the argument is that I've heard is you can fit all humans within the Grand Canyon. But it's not so much about how much physical space we physically take up. It's how much space we also use with infrastructure and agriculture and all that kind of stuff.
There's more space to a human than just themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's one of those... And to at least leave on a happy note, it will definitely be an issue in the future, but don't let...
But you'll be dead. So
don't let yourselves be fooled that it's coming as quickly as some might have you believe. So we will leave on that note. Likely the next piece of this podcast will be, at least the next episode, will be touching on the deeper issues of what happens if we are digital beings. What are the implications of that?
I'm very excited talking about that.
All right, but this will be Nick and Josh signing off, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.